constructed, what you will find is that if you were looking at the clock, between taking the task, identifying the subjects, flipping the task into a question, what's called brainstorming, I don't love that word, but note-taking about your ideas, and then constructing your sentences in that third column, it's probably about 30 minutes. That 30 minutes, what you've been doing is thinking on paper. And that means that when you start your essay, which is the next component, you are starting from a stronger place than had you just looked at the task and started writing right away. So when I'm teaching an in-class, a regular traditional class with students, I actually time that out for them and make them do that work and actually show me that work, because I don't want to be reading papers where students are starting from a really very limited idea and then struggling in how to improve their marks. You improve your marks by starting with a strong idea. So this is a way to do that. Once your third column is constructed, you're going to bring those sentences down into your introductory paragraph. This is your introductory paragraph. All of those sentences that you've constructed in that third column, and hopefully there's about 3 to 5 of them, that's called a thematic statement. Students often confuse a thematic statement from a thesis statement. They both start with T, but they're a little bit different. A thematic statement is what I, in simple form for students, like to call rumination on paper, or thinking on paper. You're having a discussion on paper about the ideas that you were presented with. So for 3 to 5 sentences, you're talking in very general terms about the relationship between fear and foresight. Now, general terms tends to be a complicated statement for students because suddenly they think, oh, I can speak so generally that it doesn't have to have much meaning. It still has to have meaning, and every sentence should definitely show the cause-effect relationship between those ideas, but you haven't mentioned a character and you haven't mentioned a text choice yet. You are simply allowing the reader into the conversation on paper. Once you move into your thesis statement, which is also part of your introductory paragraph, so your introductory paragraph is going to be made up of your thematic statement and then your thesis statement. Your thesis statement is really the most complex part of the paper, but it's also the shortest. So in formula terms, your thesis statement is going to include a text, and I'll talk about that in a minute, an author or a director, and an answer to the question that you constructed. So if your thematic statement sounds something like, one might offer that individual, I'll go back to our original task about adversity. So if our thematic statement sounds something like, one might offer that every individual in life is faced with adversity. In other words, adversity is part of the human experience. The ways in which we deal with adversity is going to be dependent on the individual that's being faced with that particular challenge. Some individuals have a stronger fortitude to overcome adversity, while others might feel conflicted about how to respond, and their response might be a non-response. That's a thematic statement. In my head now, I'm thinking about, so in our class, we studied 5 short stories, we studied 2 films, we studied a play. What do I talk about now? You have to decide based on what you've written in your thematic statement and the choices that you've had from your class, what thesis statement to write, in other words, which text you're going to use. So sometimes in my class, I'll tell students what I want them to write on. So if we've just finished a unit on short stories, I might say, I want you to write an essay on this particular short story. And you might have teachers who do that, and that's fair. On your diploma exam, though, you get to select the text that you want to write on. And part of your mark is going to be determined on how well you select that text. So if I am constructing a thesis that has to deal with adversity and an individual's response to adversity, I might think to myself, you know what, Horses of the Night by Margaret Lawrence, Christopher in that particular text has tons of adversity that he has to deal with. And he doesn't deal with it well. So my thesis statement might be, in Margaret Lawrence's Horses of the Night, Chris, one of the characters within the text, I can't say protagonist because we don't know if Vanessa or Christopher is the protagonist, so I might say Christopher, does not overcome adversity. In fact, the adversity in his life ends up breaking his spirit. So what you'll notice in the thesis statement, and this is so key, I need everybody to really understand this, is that a thesis statement is not a statement of fact. What that means is you are not simply retelling a story in a thesis statement. A thesis statement has to be an interpretation of a story, has to be an argument, has to be what's called a debatable claim. So somebody else might write about Horses of the Night, and they might say that in Margaret Lawrence's Horses of the Night, Chris, in fact, did overcome adversity, but his circumstances were such that everything in the world, even though he himself had developed some fortitude and resilience in life, his circumstances prevented him from reaching his goal. That's a debatable claim. Somebody might say, I really believe that. I really believe that Christopher had all types of resiliency, but his circumstances prevented him from actually realizing his goals. Another student might say, no way, Chris didn't develop any resiliency to overcome adversity. He simply was a casualty, that all of the circumstances in his life prevented him from developing any sort of resiliency. And as a result, he ends up, it results in his demise. The point being that both of those students have read that text, they understand it at a very high level. So the quality of the reading is going to determine the quality of the writing. So if that's established, we have two essays that could equally be proven, which moves into it's incumbent on you, once you develop a thesis, you have to know that your job now is to actually prove that thesis to be true. So by the end of the paper, if I'm marking it or a diploma marker is marking it, they can say, yes, the student has included enough evidence to actually support that thesis statement, which allows us now to move into the body paragraphs.